Alright, so today was a crazy race, and I can actually confirm to you that Sebastian Vettel is human. I think a lot of us have been thinking for a while that, he was some kind of like alien who could drive anything, anytime. And actually it wasn't his driving necessarily that caused the problem, probably just a run of bad luck. But on the first start of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, turning into the second corner, his right rear tire completely deflated. Not sure if it was some sort of issue if he clipped the curb coming out of turn one, but it just completely deflated. The second turn, so he had to drive all the way back around to the pits. And by the time he got back, the tire had been flailing, it had destroyed bodywork, part of the exhaust, and unfortunately had damaged part of the suspension. So he retired, and that was the first time he's retired since Korea of last year. And it was a pretty big blow. I was excited just because I wanted somebody else, kind of take Vettel out of the equation. What do we then get as far as a race is concerned? And it was very interesting. There was, Lewis Hamilton. Button had a particularly bad start. He, had to fight with Alonso and Webber, and Button looked like he was struggling the first few laps. He ended up pulling it together towards the end. Red Bull kind of moved Mark onto a contrary strategy where he was going to run two stints on the soft tires and then one on the hard at the very end for one lap. It ended up sort of working. He ended up fourth, which was good. He ended up getting past Massa and Rosberg. At one point it looked like he was going to be behind them, but he ended up pulling out of the bag, and he actually had the fastest lap of the race. But, it really showed that McLaren can still fight for the, top step of the podium, that they're quick. And Alonso drove the wheels off his Ferrari. The Ferrari had not been looking that fast all weekend. He qualified fifth, but he ended up finishing second. So, really good job. And the DRS zones really made the Abu Dhabi circuit enjoyable. It had kind of been the circuit where nobody could pass, and it was kind of boring in that regard. It's a great track, but it was kind of boring in the sense that, there weren't really a whole lot of overtakes. But this year there were, going into the first DRS zone, and what ended up happening over and over again, what we saw in the race, was that you'd pass somebody in the first zone, and then for the second zone, they're still within a second of you, so they get DRS, and they pass you right back. And, some people, the BBC was talking about how it's artificial, but it was fun. It was fun artificial. It was good to see, people like Di Resta and, Alguersuari start to really, fight in those zones, and it was interesting. I had a great time. One of the big problems was a few of the drivers not really yielding to blue flags, so when they were being lapped, they weren't yielding. Maldonado was probably the worst. He held up the leaders a few times, and just something to kind of throw a wrench into the race. Barrichello had a really good race. He started, of course, second to last on the grid, and ended up finishing 12th, so that was really good. Rubens' future is kind of in flux right now. Rubens is the most experienced driver on the grid. Unfortunately, it looks like Williams is going to probably pick somebody else up next year, maybe a Kimi Räikkönen coming back from retirement. So this may be Rubens' last season, which is disappointing. I think this is his 19th season. Next year would be his 20th. Williams is in a bit of almost like Renault is, where they're needing drivers who are going to bring major sponsorship money. And Kimi has that allure where he'd be able to bring money. So this could be Rubens' last last season. Brazil may be his last race. He's not sure yet. He doesn't know if he'll get to drive somewhere else or if Williams will re-sign him. So that's kind of depressing, but he's had a great career. 20 seasons or 19 seasons. That's a pretty good time. Kind of disturbing for Renault is that Bruno Senna had such a hard time keeping pace with Vitaly Petrov. Senna finished ahead of Kovalainen, but Kovalainen's fastest lap time was only half a second off. So Senna's got to be hoping for a really good home Grand Prix in Brazil if he wants to keep that seat. He'd been pretty solid. Today was just, I'm not sure what the reason was, but he was off the pace. So yeah, we'll be in Brazil in a couple weeks, and there was some news about team names. The team that's currently known as Lotus Renault will become Caterham for next year. They've bought the sports car, kit car maker Caterham, and they're kind of rebranding themselves. The team that we know now as Renault Lotus will become, I think, Lotus F1 team. The Team Lotus name is going away, but they're expected to keep their colors. So basically, the news is that they've resolved their naming battle. We'll no longer have two like Lotus-ish teams. There will be a Lotus and a Caterham. And of course, the Virgin team is being renamed Marussia. They're undergoing a transition where they're going to have less Virgin money, more money from Russian sources, so they're renaming to Marussia for next season. But yeah, it was a great race. I had a great time. I'm looking forward to Brazil, and I guess that's it. I'll talk to you guys later.